Hello, everybody. I'm Pete Hegseth, along with Lisa Booth, Griff Jenkins, and Lauren Simonetti, and welcome to the Big Weekend Show. The big story tonight. Fox News alert, at least 250, and we're hearing reports of even more. Israelis are dead and more than 1,500 wounded after the terrorist group Hamas launched an unprecedented air, ground, and even sea assault on Israeli soil. Israel responded with a large-scale counteroffensive on militants in Gaza City, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declaring war, telling his people they will fight to win.
Citizens of Israel, we are at war, not in an operation or in rounds, but at war. This morning, Hamas launched a murderous surprise attack against the state of Israel and its citizens. In the meantime, I call on the citizens of Israel to strictly adhere to the directives of the IDF and Home Front Command. We are at war, and we will win it.
Joe Biden is vowing to stand by and support Israel, stating that our ally has a right to defend itself.
I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu this morning. I told him the United States stands with the people of Israel in the face of these terrorist assaults. Israel has the right to defend itself and its people, full stop. There's never justification for terrorist attacks. And my administration's support for Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering.
Let's go right to Trey Yingst, who's live on the ground in southern Israel with the latest. Trey.
Good evening. We are learning more tonight about the Israeli reaction and the military preparations for what comes next following this massive attack that, according to Israeli media, left more than 300 people dead, both soldiers and civilians, along with dozens kidnapped and taken hostage into the Gaza Strip. Right now, there are civilians in Gaza reporting that they've received a text message from the Israeli military telling them to evacuate a town in the northeastern part of Gaza. We've seen airstrikes tonight, the Israelis targeting different buildings and Hamas positions with fighter jets and attack helicopters, though the text message is indicative of what might be to come, along with video released online showing Israeli tanks headed toward the Gaza border, while there is still fighting in some border communities between Palestinian militants and the Israeli military. The next stage of this operation for Israel will be the response. And so we can expect that response in the coming hours or days. Of note here, though, Palestinian factions continue rocket fire into southern and central Israel. I want to show you what it looked like earlier this evening. Right now, a massive barrage of rockets coming off of the Gaza Strip. This is an effort by Hamas and Islamic Jihad to overwhelm Israel's missile defense system, the Iron Dome. It's just a constant barrage, one after another. You can hear the explosions there. The Iron Dome picking up some of this fire, but not all of it.
Hamas entered our communities. It was the worst nightmare ever. Hearing about people who have been killed from your own community, and people who have been kidnapped inside their house, and talking to my parents who live the closest to the border with Gaza, and hearing from my mother that first thing in the morning she hears that they broke the window and started wrecking things inside the house. It's true my dad has a gun, but what can he do in front of 10 people or coming into their homes?
A nightmare accurately describes how most Israelis are feeling at this hour. There are people missing, they're searching for their loved ones. And when you look at Israeli media, you just see story after story of horror. One man describing how he was on the phone with his wife and 2 young daughters, and the line dropped, and ultimately he tried to track the phone, and it pinged to Khan Yunis, the second largest city inside Gaza, before video was released of his family kidnapped by Palestinian militants. Nightmare scenario for Israel, for the military, for the civilian population here. And we are told the Israeli response has not truly begun. This will be days and days of fighting. And again, it is a difficult operation for Israel because Hamas, the group in control of Gaza, says they have taken the Israeli hostages, now prisoners of war, into the tunnels beneath Gaza where they store their rockets and their weapons and their fighters. And so traditionally, Israel would strike these positions, but now they'll have to be very careful about doing that because there are Israeli soldiers and civilians alive and kept in captivity underground in Gaza. Back to you.
Trey, a nightmare indeed. And we're going to go to the maps in a moment. But before we do, how many of those cities in southern Israel are still contested, meaning there are Hamas fighters still in control or battling Israeli forces down in the south?
Earlier this evening, the Army told us about 4 hours ago there were 22 locations along the Israel-Gaza border that saw active fighting between Palestinian militants and Israeli soldiers. The number that we were given about hostages was 2 locations. We do know at least one location, Israeli forces were able to free 11 people. So one piece of good news amid this horrific story. But there are still indications that Palestinian militants are in a portion of southern Israel, and the Israeli forces are working on the ground at this hour to ensure that every area is clear so they can start the next phase of their operation. In the distance, there are some loud thuds. Israeli airstrikes are taking place right now in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Could be linked to that text message sent to civilians. They're trying to warn people to get out of the way and evacuate wherever they can because there is a heavy response on its way.
Trey, Lisa here. Just devastating, the images that we're seeing and the videos going around. This is being referred to as Israel's 9/11. Take us through the level of coordination involved with these terrorist attacks.
The coordination here was extensive, widespread, and may have had outside help from an actor like Iran. They were attacking Israel not only from the ground and from the air using paragliders, but also from the sea. The Israeli Navy tells us that they fired on multiple buoys and boats that Palestinians were on in the Mediterranean Sea, trying to ultimately infiltrate into Israel. So it shows you how much coordination went into this attack. They hit comm systems in the area. They targeted tanks and other military vehicles using drones and dropping explosives from those drones. This was a widespread coordinated attack and clearly took weeks, if not months, of planning. Back to you.
Trey, Lauren Simonetti here. My question is, why now? I mean, it happened earlier in the morning when many Israelis were home and they were sleeping. They were with their families. It was on a holiday, their day of rest. The 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. Why now?
It's a great question, and we don't know exactly, but this attack came as most of the communities along the border were marking Shabbat, a day that people stay home. And unfortunately, they were slaughtered in their homes this morning. Back to you.
Trey, it's Griff. Just wanted to ask one last question, and that is, have we learned any more about concerns that this could expand to Hezbollah getting involved, which would then put Israeli Defense Forces on the northern border of Israel with Lebanon?
Yeah, we've seen multiple reports today of UN peacekeepers retreating from their positions along the border, indicating they could fear a Hezbollah border attack. The Israeli military also confirming reports that we saw earlier that Hezbollah militants came up to the border with Israel and were fired upon. So the big fear here is that this could be a multi-front conflict, something that turns into a massive situation and war for Israel. Back to you.
Trey, great reporting as always. Stay safe. Thank you for staying up with us.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.